We start things off with a man looking over a shipyard, watching a ship propel itself off into space. As it leaves, he thinks to himself of his own goals, to one day venture off into space like that ship is doing right now. Elsewhere, on board an unknown ship, we see three figures cloaked in shadows. As we zoom in on them, they begin to discuss battle plans for a ship they have been chasing known as the Ice Hilda. We then cut to this, interesting looking fella, and this squadron of fighters, and find out they're after Ice Hilda for her treasure, meaning that these guys are pirates. The battle begins, and after some cool 90s space action, the Ice Hilda begins to get grappled by the pirate ships. Inside the Ice Hilda, we hear its AI state that the engines are critical, and it's no longer able to return fire. Not being able to see any other option, and despite the massive risks, Hilda fires up its sub-ether drive, effectively piecing out, destroying all fighters and pirates that were holding on. The three unknown figures then curse Hilda, surprised that they took such a risky move. Meanwhile, we cut to the planet known as Sentinel, with a population of 1.5 million, down to a dingy bar, where a man walks up to the bartender, and asks him about a man named Gene Starwind, saying that he fucked up his brother and he wants revenge. As the man presses the bartender for information, we see the same man who was overlooking the shipyard earlier stand up. He walks over and lets him know that he is Gene. They then roast each other for a bit, before the man pulls his gun, but not before Gene manages to be quicker on the draw, shooting him several times. As the man keels over, Gene's young friend, Jim Hawking, lets him know that the man's not out yet, and that he's actually a cyborg. After a bit more of a tussle, and after seeing how resilient this man is to death by bullet, Jim points out a weakness in the build of his cyborg body, and Gene uses his knife to take him out. Turns out that the guy hunting Gene had a pretty decent bounty on his head, so he uses the money to repair the bar and goes out for a night on the town. Before Jim and Gene part ways for the night, they see an unusual ship landing down far off in the distance. Gene then has a night filled with nothing but wholesome Christian values. After Gene wakes up from his bender, Jim informs him that the ship they saw last night was a pirate vessel, and that they've also been contracted for a protection job for a lady named Rachel. Later that night, Gene goes to meet with Rachel and suss out what the details of the job are. She states that she only needs protection to a rural farm area nearby, as she has a job to repair the equipment there. Seems a bit suspicious to me, but okay. As they wait for Jim to come pick them up in the whip, they get attacked by these tall, lanky dudes, which Gene manages to fend off. Jim then arrives, and they begin making their way to the destination, while wondering who the people that attacked them could have been. As they're making their way along, they suddenly stop, and in the middle of the road are the same mysterious pirate leaders from earlier. They tell Hilda that a simple disguise won't fool them, and Jim freaks out upon hearing her real name. Hilda, then wordlessly stands up with a grenade and throws it at the leaders before telling Gene to floor it. As they make their escape, the lanky leader starts throwing up gang signs and doing weird poses, forcing the lanky lackeys to begin shifting and contorting into whatever the fuck this monstrosity is. Back to the car, Jean demands to know how truthful Hilda has been to them. She then pulls off her mask, revealing her true face and massive eye patch. You know, you probably could have taken that off before putting the mask on. Just a suggestion. She then states that only the part about her needing protection is true, explaining that the pirate leaders and herself are chasing after the same treasure. Meanwhile, the lanky leader pulls up in his new whip of weird men, and they begin taking pot shots at each other, where Jean's bullets and rocket launcher prove to be practically ineffective against the pursuer's Tau magic. So not really having too many options left, they go for the Hail Mary with the big boy round, known as a caster shell, variant number 3, which does do this cool thing of completely obliterating him. As they reach Hilda's destination, she thanks Jean by, shooting him in the chest. Jean falls to the ground, and Hilda escorts Jim inside, telling him to pull out the trunk, which is the treasure that she is being hunted for. Hilda, however, didn't exactly do the double tap, and Jean holds her at gunpoint, revealing that Jim's PDA absorbed the bullet. And despite Hilda's objections, Jean tells Jim to open up the trunk so they can see what's inside. As they open it up, they see that the treasure inside is actually a young naked woman. Jackpot, baby! Elsewhere, the other pirate leaders use some blood magic to discover the location of where they went off to. Cutting back, Hilda explains that the girl in Cryosleep's name is Melfina, and if they repair her arm, which has gone all wonky from her time fighting, she will give them all the information they need about who she is. As Jim fixes her arm, she reveals that the whole story is pretty much that she saw how badly the pirates wanted her in particular, so she swooped in and took her first. and doesn't really know anything about her. Just then, the pirate group shows up nearby, demanding that they hand over Melfina. As they're hiding from them, they begin to discuss battle plans, with Hilda suggesting that she go to her dropship to provide aerial backup. But seeing as she just tried to kill him, Jean doesn't really trust like that, so he instructs Jim to go with her and keep a close eye. The battle then begins, and Jean, with the help of Jim's combat gadgets, pretty successfully holds them off, even when old mate starts hitting that dank shit, summoning a dragon to attack Jean, who then uses another one of the caster rounds to shut it down. Jean then loads up his last round left, ready to finish them off, and it's a dud. But luckily, Hilda comes in with the aerial support, just as Melfina inside the trunk finishes her lengthy resuscitation process from Cryosleep. Jean then says her name, and she begins to cry, asking why she had to be born in the first place. I feel you, girl. Jim then shows up, telling Jean that Hilda is waiting for them out the back, and they need to go right now. Jean then gives Melfina his jacket to cover herself, and they race out the back while still being pursued by the pirates. The old man begins to summon another dragon, and they barely manage to dodge it while zipping out. Hilda tells them that she's leaving the orbit of the planet and then leaving this system altogether, telling them to decide now if they're going with her. I mean, it doesn't really seem like they have many options right now. Jim then says they're coming with her, as they haven't been paid yet, while Jean seems to be an awfully nervous flyer. They eventually dock with Hilda's main ship, and she gets her AI to plot a course to the asteroid field known as Blue Haven, a hangout spot for outlaws such as themselves. As the countdown for the sub-ether drive starts up, and they're about to enter faster than light travel, Jean begins to look even more nervous, sweating buckets as the ship makes its jump. We then get a flashback to when Jean was younger, and flying through space with his father. One day, pirates suddenly came out of nowhere, blasting up and grappling onto the ship. His father, not wanting Jean to suffer the same fate of being taken by pirates or killed, threw Jean into an escape pod, saving him. Jean then wakes up from the nightmarish memory, and Hilda walks into the room. They've entered the main region of Blue Haven and are preparing to dock. As they set their feet down on solid ground again, much to the relief of Jean, Hilda requests this dude known as a Corbinite to repair and restock her ship. They then part ways for the afternoon, Jim going with Melfina to get her some new actual clothes, and Jean going with Hilda to somewhere a bit more cultured. Over a few drinks, Hilda explains to Jean that her main plan now is to try and find a very specific, grappler-styled ship. Just then, some goons walk over, offering themselves to join Hilda's crew, which she pretty quickly shuts down. They then try to start shit, but she again shuts all three of them down with this knuckle-duster taser before telling them to leave. Later that night, Jim and Melfina share one room, while Jean and Hilda share another. The goons that we saw earlier though show up, break into the room, and try to attack them while they're sleeping. But they saw this coming, so they're waiting and ready, quickly taking care of them. As they step out of their room, they see a massive mech dude break through an elevator and start coming towards them. And Jean is annoyed that due to the rules of Blue Haven, no guns are allowed. He does, however, think of a workaround, by conveniently having paintball bullets on hand. Somehow. He shoots at the mech's windows, completely blinding it, and the leader of the goons is too swole, so he can't get out of the top hatch, giving Hilda plenty of time to sneak up behind him and zap him again. She then interrogates one of the goons. God, I wish that was me. And she finds out that a man known as McDougal hired them to attack her. With this knowledge, they wake up Jim and Melfina, beginning to head to the dock back towards her ship, where we see that the ship's technicians have already dealt with an attack intended for them. Everyone's curious, so Hilda explains that these attacks are the result of her getting mixed up with something known as the Galactic Ley Line, and they're recommended to leave, as there seems to be more trouble brewing. As they leave Blue Haven, they are immediately pursued by 5 enemy grappler ships. Hilda then asks Jean to help defend the ship from these attackers, but he claims with how unwell he's feeling from flying that he'd be practically useless. So Jim offers to man the laser gun in his place, with Melfina operating the auxiliary controls. The pursuers then split into 2 groups, and Jim begins to take on the ones that he can see, shooting the ship's lasers at them. But they have anti-laser shields on board, preventing the kill shot. They manage to continue avoiding the pursuers until a massive cruiser-class ship blocks their path, refusing to move as it has right-of-way. We then cut to inside the ship, with the leader of the vessel declaring that she is the Katal Empire's ambassador to this region, Aisha Clan. She then orders them to clear the way, as they're planning to dock in Blue Haven. The fact that the Katal Empire is here scares the pursuers so much, and they claim that they're worse than pirates, before falling back. Hilda then plays a game of high-risk chicken with the Katal ship, saying that that she's not changing course, and if they don't want to all die in a fiery death explosion, then they need to drop their shields so they can pass through. The Katal ship does so, and uses its boosters to narrowly avoid Hilda and her ship. Afterwards, in a fury, Aisha Clan with her power as ambassador declares that Hilda and the 5 pursuers are under arrest in the name of their empire. The smaller ships don't really have any shot at outrunning the cruiser, so they give up. But Hilda, with a sub-ether drive almost ready to go, books it dangerously through the asteroid field. Aisha, in a rage, and seeing this as an attempt to embarrass their empire, orders her crew to open fire. But Hilda is already too far away, and pieces out to another system with a sub-ether drive, to meet with some old friends. During a few of their jumps to the next destination, Jean asks about what this galactic ley line is, and Hilda informs them that it's a region of space which some of the pirate factions are heavily interested in finding, as there is apparently an abundance of treasure there. They then slip out of subspace and make their way over to a moon belonging to a planet in the system. They search on radar for signs of the people they're meant to be meeting, but all they manage to find is debris belonging to the ship of the person Hilda was supposed to meet. Just then, an unknown vessel lifts off from the moon's surface and begins to close in. The ship's AI, Horus, informs them that it's the same pirate ship from earlier, and it begins to send out its fighters. Inside the pirate ship, we see a man telling the young pirate leader that it's just as he said. Hilda had come to this exact location, and we find out this man is the one that ordered the attack on them earlier, McDougal. Meanwhile, pissed off that her friends have been killed, Hilda orders Jean to take the gunner position. Jean protests, saying that he will still be of no use, and she basically tells him to snap out of it and stop being such a little bitch. That if he wants to be a spacer, he has to get used to this. Jean thinks back to his childhood, then resolves himself into action, taking control of the gunner seat Jim had been using. Hilda states that since lasers most likely won't work, he should use the missiles. And use the missiles he does, launching a barrage at the incoming enemies. The missiles do pretty good work, against all except the old man, who again uses his magic to defend against the attack, while also landing a small magic love tap on the ship, before falling back to their mothership. Inside, McDougal is surprised that they seem to be just letting them go, when the younger leader says it's all part of their plan. And the old man states that Hilda's ship has now been marked, and no matter where they go, they can now find them. Hilda then plots a course to another location, 40 light years away and in the middle of practically nowhere, telling Jean that is where the other hidden grappler ship is. Elsewhere, on Blue Haven, we see that Aisha Clan is being reprimanded for letting Hilda get away, but also for shooting within the confines of Blue Haven itself. As she tries to argue back, saying that she didn't know it was Hilda at the time, she keeps on getting reminded that this is a recording, not a live back and forth. She then gets her title as ambassador stripped, and is ordered to remain at Blue Haven as an officer to gather information about the galactic ley line, which she again tries to argue, but it's a recording, so, doesn't really work. Sometime later, Hilda and the crew arrive at their destination, which is super close to a star. Jean complains that there's nothing out here, when the Horus AI states that it's found the vessel. Hilda explains to Jean that this vessel is the love child of the Galactic Space Force's technology and the intelligent brains of the pirate factions. A powerful combination which never should have been made. The crew is just above the asteroid that has the legendary ship on it. The asteroid, however, looks as if it's a small station, and Hilda latches her ship down before heading off over to one of the storage bays with her dropship. As they make their way inside, they see the ship for the first time, named XGP-15A-2. As they all appear starstruck with its beauty, Hilda, as there's close to no gravity on the asteroid, jumps up towards it, followed closely by Jean. As they make their way inside the ship, Jean comments on how unusual the controls seem to be, with Hilda stating that this is a special ship after all. Jim then asks what a crazy good ship like this is doing all the way out here in the middle of nowhere, and Hilda responds by saying that she stole it from the people that made it. Hilda then begins to bring the ship's power back online, and the ship's computer and AI, named Gilliam II, begins to make introductions. But even though Hilda announces that they are now the crew, the AI checks its memories and finds nothing regarding them. The AI then notices that some of its files have been deleted, but Hilda orders it to simply register them as the new crew, which it begins to do. After scanning them all in, it announces that while it has control over other systems, it doesn't have any navigational parameters, so it can't start the ship, as that can only be done by manual means. Hilda then states that Melfina will be the pilot. Just as Hilda is about to give a name to the ship that is a bit easier to say than XGP-15A-2, Horus announces that the pirate vessel they fought previously is quickly closing in on their position. position. Shocked by this, Hilda says that she wants them to launch the ship immediately, stating that she will go back to her main ship to intercept them, as she doesn't want this special ship to be stolen. They then all get to their respective stations where they'll be most effective. Jean in the pilot seat and Melfina going into a navigational control pod. We then cut to Hilda getting back into her ship, and it's revealed that she only has 34% of total ammunition left, and going for it anyway, she lets the missiles fly. Back to the others, we see that the pod Melfina went into acts as a sort of biocommunication system, where she can uplink directly with the ship. She then however discovers that there is something blocking the engines from starting up, so the ship directs Jim towards it. It then explains to Jean that these issues are a result of it never actually being tested for realsies. Only the engines have ever been tested, not the whole ship working together. But it should work, maybe? Hilda then gets back through to the ship, stating that she isn't able to hold all the forces back and a few are breaking through, some of which are the old man and those lanky dudes. After a brief fight, Jean tells Gilliam to open up the hangar doors to suck them out, which manages to get rid of all of them except the old man. As Jean makes his way back to the cockpit, Jim has enabled the engines properly and the ship has made its preparations. Melfina instructs Jean to turn the ignition key, and as he does, everything starts to kick up. Just as the hangar doors again open for them to leave through, a section of the main pirate ship is waiting just outside, and we see that Hilda isn't faring much better, as the grappler combat section of the pirate ship has now done its job and grabbed onto her. We then see Jean asking Gilliam if there are any weapons on board the ship, and he says that there are only grappler arms, but due to the space restrictions right now, they would be practically useless. As the pirate ship then fires its anchors towards their ship, something crashes into the side of it, and the AI reports that it's a thermonuclear missile. The old man then hears reports coming in from his crew, stating that they're under attack from that dude McDougal, who proceeds to completely blow up the pirate ship. Hilda then contacts him and asks him what he's doing, and he states that he's under a new contract now to destroy the XGP ship. He then proceeds to launch missile after missile at the asteroid, planning to knock the asteroid into the sun's gravity well. Back to the XGP, Jean asks if the ship can see what's going on, and as it gets one of the dock's cameras up, he sees McDougal's ship, which looks all too familiar to him, as it was the ship that he saw when his father saved his life and he was sent out of the escape pod. McDougal then launches something called a Halcyon missile, a big boy which knocks the asteroid dead towards the sun. We then see that even though the pirates may be able to pull themselves out of harm's way, Hilda cannot pull her ship out, and she calls out to Jean and crew, telling them to respond. After a few moments of nothing but static though, we see Jean using the grappler arms of the ship to literally tear through the asteroid and break free. Using the powerful engines, he easily breaks free from the sun's pull, forcing the pirates to again begin attacking him, which is absolutely no match for the XGP, killing old mate in the explosion. Hilda, in her dropship, then goes up towards them, telling them to grab her, but just before they reach her, an anchor line from the pirate ship shoots towards them, knocking Hilda off course. She then leaves behind Horace, using a grappling hook to anchor onto the line, but she is unable to get to the XGP before the pirates, in their spacesuits, start coming at her. After a short fight, the anchor line then snaps, flinging everyone not on board the XGP away, and Gilliam informs Jean that there is nothing they can do. If they go to save Hilda, they will fall into the sun along with her. As Hilda spots the young pirate leader beginning to cast a spell towards their ship, she grabs onto her leg with a grappling hook, telling Jean over the radio that if he can hear her, to remember this, that outlaws don't die easily. She then bites something in her mouth, causing a massive explosion which takes the both of them out. In a somber silence, as they all realized what's happened, Gilliam tells Jean that he has to plot a course for them, now that they're safely outside the gravity of the star. But Jean says before he does that, he knows exactly what he's going to name the ship, giving the vessel the name of Outlaw Star. That is it for this part, boys. If you enjoyed, please don't forget to like the video. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. I will see you next time.